877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425, 877-973-7425. I guess I should open the call screening program. I'll get to Ted Cruz. I just actually got a very fair email from a friend of mine, but before I get to any of that, let me round out this rough week with a thought before I do anything else, and then I think I got to move on. Before I move on from the melancholy events of this week, I want to say something out of the gate. So here, let me explain to you real quick. There's a point here. Let me explain to you how radio tends to work. You have local stations around the country, and they tend to employ some local people to provide some local content. But a lot of radio, in terms of scale and size, and this is something Rush Limbaugh got early on, is you can take one voice and syndicate him. You broadcast him around the country. Now, here in simple terms is how this model works. You take, for example, the Rush Limbaugh Show. The Rush Limbaugh Show gives you 15 minutes. If you're a local radio station, you get 15 minutes to fill however you want to fill it. So you can put in news programming, your weather forecast, your traffic, and all your commercials in that 15 minutes. And then Rush Limbaugh gets 5 to 7 minutes, and he gets to fill that however he wants with advertising. And your requirement as a local show is you're required to play that 5 minutes of advertising from Rush Limbaugh. And if there's a weather event or a breaking news story at the local level, and you can't play Rush Limbaugh at the time because he's preempted by the news story, you're required to play those ads still, those 5 minutes of ads. You have no choice. You have to play those ads. And if that means you have to give up your local advertising and refund the money to your local advertisers, you've got to do that because you're obligated to pay that 5 minutes. And you got to fill out an affidavit saying, I have played those ads. Now, if you're the host, the syndicator out of the gate gets 30% off the top, usually more than that. And if you're a radio station that has a host and puts that host in syndication, you lose money by and large because you're having to rely on a syndicator. You're not doing it yourself. You don't own the satellites. And Rush built this model, really. He built talk radio using a syndication model. They started out with like 58 stations and exploded. They were over 200 stations within a year or so. Fundamentally transformed radio, and it's what everybody does now. And it works great for a lot of people, but increasingly the economics of a lot of stations make it difficult to do. And a lot of stations have internalized that radio is on decline, and because radio is on decline, it will never be the same. And we got to go back to just specific local programming. We want people to listen to our market, not one guy who's across the nation, and we're losing money by giving up ad revenue and ad inventory. And when I wanted to do this show, I thought, you know what, instead of using a syndicator, why don't I buy the satellite time myself? And I'll deliver a product. I'll make it a good product people want to listen to. Maybe you don't want to listen to this monologue, but we'll see. And I'll deliver it myself, and I'll run my own ads, and I'll find my own advertisers, and I'll put those advertisers in my talk time. I'll cut into my talk time so they get played by me. I do the ads, so I can say for certain I've done the ads. And the local guy doesn't have to play the ads. If there's a breaking news event, well, he's under no obligation because I've played the ads. I've ensured they've gone out. The local guy doesn't have to play them. And so the local guy, and I give them a little more, instead of 15 minutes, give them 17 minutes. So they got 2 more minutes. They can put more ads in. They don't have to worry about my make goods. They don't have to worry about affidavits. So they don't have to worry about the bureaucracy. All they got to do is take the product. And you know, with Rush, when you're a big station, you've got to pay for Rush Limbaugh. You don't just give up your ad space. You got to pay a fee. Some stations pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, he's that good. Everybody wants to listen to him. You know he's going to generate enough ratings, revenue, and listeners that you'll make your money up. But for most, you give them the product. So I give away the product for free. And I've got a daily email, and I have subscribers to that email, and those subscribers help cover the cost of me paying for the satellite. And for my employees, I have a broadcast engineer, a control board operator, Jim, who runs the show. I've got Charlie, who does the affiliates and ad sales. He's answering the phones right now. Candace, my assistant. Philip, who does all the digital stuff. The subscribers to the email help initially subsidize that. It also makes me somewhat bulletproof from advertiser boycotts, so the left can't harass me in that way. I ran this by Rush Limbaugh, and to this day, he is the only person other than Charlie, my producer, who out of the gate immediately got it. He immediately got what I was trying to do and was supportive of it. And he connected me to Craig Kitchen, his head of EIB, who connected me to my agent, John McConnell, to deal with me as radio grows out, who knows the industry, who can help me, who I can turn to and ask things. And to this day, though, Rush Limbaugh was the person who understood exactly what I wanted to do, helped me figure out some of the kinks along the way, and we were able to get up and running by myself without relying on a syndicator. And we're now on 16 stations. We actually lost a station because they went out of business. But we're on 16 across the state of Georgia. We're starting to get inquiries out of the state of Georgia. And I feel vindicated to a degree and also deeply frustrated in that Rush so got the model and hardly anyone else really understands what I'm doing. I'm going to give you a quality product for free. You have no obligation other than to run it for the 3 hours. And if there's breaking news, don't worry about it. No harm, no foul. And I'll make money by putting the ads in my talk time. Don't worry about my ads. And I'll start it out with an email and a website, and we'll generate revenue off that to subsidize radio. And one day radio will grow enough to subsidize the email and the web. And he understood it. Now, there's a larger point here that I want to get to. Every single one of us has someone where we can look over our right shoulder and they're there and we can ask them questions or we can get help. And I haven't wanted to overemphasize my relationship with Rush because there are a lot of people who knew him better, who had a better relationship with him, who played golf with him, who he talked to on the phone more than me. But he was always there. If I had a question, if I had a problem about radio, he was always there to answer. I could look over my right shoulder and there he was. Part of growing up is one day you get to the point where you look over your right shoulder and there's a wall. When I was in my law practice, there was always a partner, and I could turn to that partner and say, what do we do here? Who gave me better advice than what I had learned in law school, because that partner had always practiced law. They were there. They knew. And when I became an associate at a law firm and was working up and on the verge of 5 years as an associate in my law firm, that was typically where you then transition to being partner. Here come law clerks who would come to me for questions, and I could answer the questions. I would be the guy they looked to on the right. I would look to them on the left. They would ask a question, and I could answer it. But if I didn't know the answer, I could look to the person to my right and get the answer and convey it down, and I would learn something, and the law clerk would learn something. And part of growing up is one day you realize there's no one to the right of you, and there are way more people to the left of you. You have kids and you're responsible for your kids. You have a family, you have a job. And one day, there's no one you can turn to. You're the guy who's got to have the answers. And everybody's looking at you for the answers. And you know, when you age, those of you who are younger than me, I promise you hit 40. And then you get to 45 where I just hit. And so you're like, I got gray in my beard. How did this happen? I got to start shaving more. Where did all this gray come from? Where did the wrinkles come from? Why does my knee hurt? Why does this part of my body no longer work the way it worked yesterday? Why do my fingers tingle when I wake up in the morning? Why can't I sleep through the night without having to pee anymore? But that's the physicality of aging. But the mentality of aging is over time creeping like a shadow until you're fully in the darkness and unaware of it until it happens. All the people you look to the right disappear. And the number of people on the left grows. And whether you want to or not, whether you realize it or not, one day you're in charge. One day you're the leader. And one day you've got to make the decisions. And you wake up and you think, my gosh, what if I screw it up? I got all these people who rely on me, mouths to feed, people to employ, people who are looking to me. Who do I look to for advice? And if you're a praying man, well, you get on your knees and you pray. And maybe you find someone. I'm blessed to have an agent who was the president of WABC in New York for a long time. And maybe you have that guy for a while longer as you're off in a new endeavor, but oftentimes it's just you. There's a saying, fake it till you make it, and sometimes you got to fake it until you make it. Sometimes you've just got to summon your best advice based on everything you've done along the way. I was very blessed with Rush in that I could email him in the middle of the night. Occasionally, he would email me. If I had done something and he had seen a headline or something, he'd email me with sharp advice. I got asked last night by a guy, he's 30, he's got a radio show in Colorado. What advice did Rush give me? And I freely give. You got to have someone around you who can tell you you've screwed up. You got to have someone you trust who knows they're not going to be fired for telling you the hard truth. Because no one in radio will ever tell you the hard truth. Everyone in radio tells you you're hunky-dory until it's too late to fix the ratings, and then they cancel you. There's a lot of mendacity in radio. You got to have a relationship with your audience so you can talk about stuff like this. People go, oh, it's a politics show. I'm going to hear about politics. No, right now you're hearing about life. You got to be able to do that. You got to be engaging. You got to keep people company. You got to build a relationship with them. Rush would always say, entertainer. His advice to me, I can quote for you what he told me. Do not go into this business to save the world. You're never going to save the world if you go into radio to save the world. You go into it, your job is to keep people company. If you keep people company, you can save the world, but you can't. If your job is to save the world, you'll never do it. Your job is to keep people company. And maybe keep more people, adding more people to it. There's a lot of personal advice that I don't feel comfortable sharing. But there was a lot of advice. And now I turn to the right and he's not there. He blessed me in a way with a great radio agent. He connected me to Craig Kitchen, who connected me to my agent, John McConnell. And Rush told me he hoped that would be what Craig recommended. John McConnell, my agent, was instrumental in getting Sean Hannity off the ground as well. And I wouldn't have that guy, but for Rush, that now I can turn to the right and he's there. We spoke yesterday more than we've spoken probably in the last 6 months. But sometimes, for most times, when you grow up, you realize it just happens, and it really is like the shadow moving across, and suddenly you're inside the shadow. Suddenly it's dark. And you turn to the right, and there's nobody there. You turn to the left, and there's a long line of people waiting to have a moment of your time. To ask you, what's next? What do I do? How do I move forward? And oftentimes you're like, how do I know? And you're just supposed to. And so, I don't know. I've gotten so many people who have emailed me in the last 2 days. What do we do now? What do we do? Gosh, the country really is ending. A lot of people upset about Rush. Rush Limbaugh was a happy warrior and an eternal optimist. And I can tell you, he's not here for me to look right and look at and see, but I can tell you what he would say. 1 foot forward, 1 foot forward, and then the next one, and then the next one. And pretty soon you realize you're walking out of the shadow back into the light. Always walk towards the light. And that's what all of us will do.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now at 877-90.
Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you want to be on the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I got to give credit here to CNN. CNN is running. I'm not going to play the report from CNN. CNN's Ivan Watson from Hong Kong is running a report on women describing gang rapes and beatings at Chinese government intern camps. The British Broadcasting Corporation has been thrown out of China for daring to accurately cover what's happening in the internment and concentration camps in China. Really awful, terrible stuff. They've got under cover video. It's just really vile stuff. And it is disturbing that it hadn't got a lot of coverage. And I want to give credit to CNN for covering this. And I want you to understand how big it is a deal that CNN covers what's happening in China. In fact, CNN has given it more coverage than Fox. It's important that you understand that CNN is owned by AT&T. And AT&T also owns Warner Brothers. And Warner, CNN is a subsidiary of Warner. Warner Brothers increasingly depends on the Chinese box office for access to make money. With the American box office in decline, not just because of COVID, the American box office revenue was going down anyway. And so in all the movie studios, Disney, Paramount, Universal, you name it, they need access to China. They need the billion people of China in order to cover their costs. And so a lot of movies are catering to the Chinese audience now. A lot of movies you see in this country, it's the Hollywood is essentially selling out to China. They don't want to offend China because they want access to the Chinese box office. Beijing could very easily tell Warner Brothers, nope, can't show your films here. Well, what do we do? Well, you didn't do anything, but CNN did, and you own CNN. They could very easily do this. I mean, look at the NBA. The NBA could not speak out on the human events or human affairs, human rights tragedy in Hong Kong because of the Chinese. They made $1 billion in China. They got massive amounts of money in China. They do tours in China. When what's his name with the Houston Rockets dared to speak up, the Chinese were willing to cut it all. ESPN is owned by Disney and ABC, and ESPN wouldn't show the Hong Kong protesters. Disney does not want to get blackballed in China. Disney was willing to film Mulan in an area of China where there are concentration camps, and they defend the move to this day. They don't want to be shut out of the box office. So CNN does deserve public credit for doing what it did. CNN deserves credit for highlighting what's going on in these Chinese government internment camps because they're putting the entirety of AT&T's business in film and TV at jeopardy, and they still proceeded. So they deserve praise.
30.
The Chinese are ruthless about this stuff. And we, all of us, need to know whether we like CNN overall or not. They gotta be praised. More of this, please. People need to know what's going on in China. When you come back here at the bottom of the hour, y'all can take issue with me on Ted Cruz. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Ted Cruz is in a lot of hot water. Well, he would be in hot water, except there's none in Texas. Oh, man. I feel so bad. I've got a lot of friends who are in Texas. A whole lot of friends are in Texas. One day I suspect I'll have a compound in Texas with the rest of them. In Texas, I have a buddy of mine. His signature issue is clown farts. Believe it or not, it is the only issue he cares about. Yes, I know it. Clown farts. He's obsessed. And he wants a compound in Texas where no clowns can come. And he's listening right now. Listen, I think that the outrage is silly. It's disturbing that so many people want Ted Cruz to just be around to emote. And he wanted to take his family out of the cold and go to Cancun, and the media has come for Ted Cruz. They don't like him to begin with. That has been my reaction, that it is a bunch of misery loves company, and everyone in Texas is miserable. How dare Ted Cruz go get comfortable with his family? They apparently organized among friends, and some of the friends leaked the chat. Okay, all right, so there's a lesson here for me. Philip and Charlie tell me too often I overshare with people who I consider friends, who maybe I should not overshare with just everybody who I consider a friend. That is possibly true. They are probably right. And the Ted Cruz experience suggests they are absolutely right, because someone in Ted and Heidi's friend group leaked the conversation to the New York Times that Heidi Cruz was suggesting they all hop a plane and go to Cancun where it's warm and sunny at the beach. Just listen, I don't need you from the peanut gallery on that right now. You stop. You get mad at me during the show for reading text messages, and here you are distracting me. If I want to overshare, I'll overshare. My producer's having none of it. In any event, poor old Ted Cruz. Okay, that's my reaction. But I want to tell you that a friend of mine who lives in Texas, who I consider to be one of the more thoughtful people in my circle of friends, says that the problem here is that Ted Cruz got elected. You know what? We'll record this for posterity's sake. My position has been that Ted Cruz, there's nothing he can do. Ted Cruz is not a lineman. He's not a power guy. He doesn't work for the energy company. He's a U.S. senator. He has no jurisdiction. He has no legislative control. He has no oversight. Nothing. If he wants to take his family to Cancun to keep them warm when there's nothing else he can do, go. Anything he did in Texas would essentially be performative. So let him take care of his family. I mean, he's not in charge. The media, of course, savaging him. A buddy of mine, though, makes a point, me not being in Texas had not considered, and I think this is fair, that Ted Cruz wanted to be a leader. He wanted to serve, and he got elected. He wants to be a leader. He clearly wants to be president, and he walked off the field while the troops, while the voters, while the citizens of Texas are in despair. And his point is that just as a lieutenant on the field sleeps in the mud in the trenches with the boys and doesn't go live in a lap of comfort for morale purposes, Ted Cruz, if he wants to lead, needs to be a leader. And part of being a leader is you're washing people's feet along with everyone else. You're in the misery with everyone else. You're leading by example. And I actually think that's a well-articulated point. There's not a whole lot Ted Cruz can do, but the people of Texas are miserable, and they want to see their leaders leading. And frankly, there really aren't a lot of leaders leading in Texas right now. The Texas Republicans do control the entire state of Texas. top to bottom, the Republicans control the state, and they're trying to blame the windmills when it turns out the windmills generate less than 15% of the power of Texas. One of my concerns with everything here is the optics. I acknowledge are terrible for Cruz, but performance would just be performance. I guess if he had burned his whole house down, people could have stood around it and kept warm and said, well, he did something for us. But the larger issue is this, and I think this is a very fair point here, is that whether it's mean tweeting or yelling or showing up with cameras in tow to the homeless shelter or what, there are a lot of people who look like they're not really leading. They're trying to use it for PR purposes or whatnot. And also, there's a very clear problem that has happened in Texas, and everyone is so busy blaming the windmills or casting aspersions on Cruz or what have you. No one's actually looking at who caused this problem. Who's getting fired for this? What's getting fixed for this? What must be done for this? On top of that, you got a bunch of people on the left who are laughing at Texas, which has a spirited independence. And California, of course, it is routine that the power goes out in California. And here it happens to Texas. Many of the Texas politicians who ridiculed California, the Californians are now ridiculing them. Well, it is a once-in-a-lifetime weather event for Texas as opposed to a daily occurrence in California. I do think the Cruz situation is different from the mayor of Austin. The mayor of Austin, Texas, went off to Cabo San Lucas after ordering people to socially distance and not have gatherings, and he got on a private plane and flew down to Mexico so that he could gather and not social distance. There is a level of hypocrisy there. Ted Cruz, who has no oversight in any of this, it's not really hypocritical for him to pack up and take his family away and keep them warm and comfortable. It's not the same as the mayor of Austin. But I do have to acknowledge that there is validity in the criticisms that if you want to be a leader, sometimes you got to show up and look like you're leading and not abandon the field when everybody else is miserable. You got to be miserable too. It comes with the job. And frankly, it was one of the things I hated about being in government. I was a terrible elected official because you would have people come in. So you would have people come in to city council. When I was in city council in Macon, people would get to come in and they'd have a minute or two to just talk. And half of them would come in and they just wanted to complain about something. It's not even anything any of us could do. They just wanted to complain. Well, I would work. I would write. I had my laptop. I would be busy. And I honest to goodness, I could not care less that someone wanted to come in and complain that they were slighted in a grocery store or their trash service, the trash can was tipped over by the trash guys, or on and on and on. I just, why? You get to complain. I don't have to listen to you. Oh, but you were elected. You were paid to listen to these people. No, I was not. I was not paid enough to listen to Crazy Town. So I have impatience for that. The performance part of public service, and I would be terrible as an elected official. I served one term on city council in Macon, Georgia, and did not want to continue on. Wasn't going to run again, and then got a job in radio, and they didn't want me to be an elected official, so I had to step down a few months early from my term, which was fine with me. I wasn't going to run again anyway. It was a miserable job. A part-time job where people expected you to be full-time. And, I was on CNN at the time and the like. It was terrible. I would be a terrible politician. I do not want to have to pretend to be nice to people who I mean, you should be nice to people, but there are some people who really are terrible. And why do I need to pretend like they're my friends? I don't know. Well, Cruz did sign up for the job. So I guess he signed up for the part of the performance theater that is required of him. So I get that. I do. But I still think the whole thing is silly, that there's really nothing he could do. There's nothing he could do. And while everyone is complaining about Ted Cruz and complaining about the windmills, no one is paying attention to what could have been done. How could this be fixed? How can you get the lights back on? And who should be fired? Because very clearly people should be fired for this. very clearly somebody somewhere needs to be fired for what happened in Texas. Hopefully someone will do it. Now, someone also needs to be fired in New York. And that someone should probably be the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. This scandal, maybe it'll deprive him of another term. But what's so interesting here are the Democrats essentially circling the wagon around Andrew Cuomo, defending Andrew Cuomo's behavior. That, well, people are going to die of COVID anyway. Might as well die in their nursing home. What this shows me is that, again, as I've told everyone, the Democrats are perfectly fine with their own Donald Trump and will defend their own Donald Trump just like everyone else. And they don't like to point this out, but Andrew Cuomo is increasingly their Donald Trump, and they're perfectly happy to defend him. Some are speaking out, and those people themselves are getting in trouble. Here's one of the General Assembly members from New York.
He did. On Saturday, he called me 4 more times. His staff probably called me another 5 times. He pushed outside people to, it was actually Lunar New Year weekend for us, our family. So we were hyper stressed. My wife was crying that night, and she just, didn't want to deal with it. And the following day, I spoke to an attorney, and on Monday, we secured counsel, and I told the governor's office that if you want to talk to me, then you should just talk to my counsel about this moving forward.
Assemblyman Kim, just over here. Can you back up for a lot of our national viewers that may not have followed all the details of this over the past 6 months or so? Governor Cuomo has been criticized in the past for moving people with COVID back into nursing homes. And a lot of people believe that actually led to an explosion in the deaths inside of those nursing homes. Are those the numbers that you and others believe he's trying to cover up the number of people that died in nursing homes, in part because of the order to move COVID patients into nursing homes?
I think that's partially it. Those numbers did finally come out. There's a total of 9,000 COVID positive patients that were transferred back to nursing homes in the 2-month time period where he had a mandate in. The nursing homes couldn't reject them. These were underprepared nursing homes. I know this because I was on the ground working with them. They were crying that they couldn't do this. Half of the staff members already had COVID by then, and they were out. They weren't working. But Governor, he just doubled down and tripled down. Other states might have adopted those policies, but they quickly repealed and moved in an entire direction to a point where they started banning COVID positives in nursing homes. But he continued to do that, and it was a bad policy. But that's not the point, Joe. I think we could all understand in the first wave, you could have made some mistakes. I think the public, myself, we would have sympathized and continued to work with him. But he shut us out. He covered information, and he tripled down on bad policies. And that's why we're here today, because he refused to talk about the truth and acknowledge the mistakes so we can move the state forward.
Oh, that guy, he's going to disappear, isn't he? I mean, gosh. Here's the problem, is that so much of the media is in the tank for Andrew Cuomo, or at least they were when Donald Trump was there, and now suddenly they've turned on him. But, CNN won't let Chris Cuomo interview him anymore. Chris Cuomo got mad at me yesterday. Chris Cuomo said I was wrong about Ted Cruz, and I told him he was wrong about his brother, and he didn't like that. There's got to be a reckoning for what happened. People died needlessly. The media championed Andrew Cuomo even against Ron DeSantis, who objectively per capita death total numbers handled the virus better. And their excuse, well, Florida's warm. Florida's warm. Yeah, except remember the summer spike? It's like they want to make us forget there was a summer surge that they were blaming on Ron DeSantis and Brian Kemp when it was the George Floyd protesters hanging out in crowds unmasked. The media's got to there's got to be a reckoning across the board. Institutions are failing. Institutions are failing. Trust in politicians is collapsing, and no one seems to be serious anymore. No one seems to be seriously looking at issues right now that need to be looked at. One of them is China. And here's the interesting thing with Cuomo. Conservatives knew this was happening last year. And it was conservative voices. It was Janice Dean at Fox, the meteorologist, and others who were pointing out what was going on in New York. The media didn't want to hear anything about it because of Trump. The media institutions of this country are failing. You know, I am concerned about the institutional integrity of the media and people going in and finding alternate media sources. Like, for example, take Rush Limbaugh's passing. My daughter was ambushed at school this week by a bunch of people wanting to would you be upset about this guy? Did you know he said this? Did you know he said that? And going online to find it, all the media organizations attacking Rush Limbaugh, saying things about Rush. The man spent 22,000 plus hours on radio over 33 years. And they've got maybe 5 minutes of stuff they take issue with out of 22,000 hours. And more than half of that is taken out of context. Some of it he did apologize for. Some of it he stood by. They just didn't like. But that's what they want to make as the headlines. There is a clear, real, and problematic issue of accountability in the press these days. And the fact that they can't hold a guy like Andrew Cuomo, or only now want to try to hold him accountable after excusing him when conservatives were saying this was going on, because they're as broken by partisanship as they claim Republicans are, that's a real problem. People are relying on people for integrity and trust, and those people that they're relying on for integrity and trust, some of them are lying to them. And it's becoming harder to make people realize they're being lied to, because who can you believe? The media itself lies to you.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Erick Erickson, the information.
Hello there. Well, we'll get to this. So you got to stick around here, because there's a Brian Kemp issue that we need to talk about in the next hour. It's not a bad one. No. He's actually doing something y'all will like. And we need to talk about it. I do want to tell you real quick, though. Mass vaccination sites are going up in Georgia. This is, those of you nationally, bear with me. I'm in Georgia. I care about my people. There will be sites located in Macon, Hateville, Albany, and Clarksville opening Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. If you are looking for a vaccination site, the state of Georgia, GEMA, the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency, announced plans to open 4 mass COVID-19 vaccination sites starting February 22nd. So they're again, Macon, Hateful down by the Two Dead Mayors International Airport, Albany, and Albany. I can't. My wife ridicules me for not being able to. You go down to Albany and they say Albany. Nope. I'm sorry. I love y'all. I love you. So between Anheuser-Busch and Miller Lite, total Miller Lite guy, you got to go to Albany for that. I love Albany. And Clarksville, those are the 4 locations, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The Augusta National, a buddy of mine is telling me, Augusta National has opened a vaccine center. You can get a hole-in-one there in your arm. Horrible. I'm sorry. It's Justin's fault. The drive-through vaccination sites you can go to, and if you want to, you can go to myvaccinegeorgia.com. Now, it's actually Georgia spelled out, myvaccinegeorgia.com. If you go to the myvaccinegeorgia.com website, you are met with 4 boxes: individuals 65 and older, long-term care facilities, healthcare personnel, and law enforcement. Those are who are eligible. And then you click the yes, I am eligible, and you can find where you can fill out. There's a pre-registration form, your name, your address, your cell phone, occupation. Are you seeking your first dose? Are you an EpiPen user? And you can pre-register. Now, here's the thing. You cannot just show up. If you show up at one of these sites and you do not have a reservation, you're not going to get the shot. No jabs for you. So there's going to be the Albany, Georgia Forestry site on Newton Road, the Habersham County Fairgrounds on Tacoma Highway, the Macon Farmers Market on Eisenhower Parkway, and the Delta Airlines Museum in Hateville. Those are the 4 locations statewide. So you got Northeast Georgia, you got Southwest Georgia, you got Atlanta, and you got Middle Georgia. They are planning on opening additional locations around the state, excuse me, for Northwest Georgia and Southeast Georgia. They have not gotten those locations yet. They're planning on. You hadn't been forgotten, folks. You hadn't been forgotten. They just vaccine supply and where they need to make up for beneath vaccine. Now, when we come back,
15.
The governor wants this legislature to take away some of his power. Wait until you hear what power he wants them to take away. Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. In honor of Rush Limbaugh, we will declare this an open line Friday if you want to call in about your topics. But remember, your job is to make me look good. All right, before we get to any phone calls, I got to tell you about this, and I gotta commend the governor of Georgia. It is rare to see a governor ask that power be taken away from him. And the governor of the state of Georgia is asking that his power be taken away from him. There are a lot of court cases, and there are a lot of things in Georgia law that make it difficult for governors of the state of Georgia to distinguish between entities in states of emergency. So carving exceptions for churches in an executive order it really doesn't work. Now, to this governor's credit, and I don't think he gets enough credit for this, one of the things that he said early on and has maintained is that it is no business of the government to tell you your business is not essential. If you believe that your business is your lifeline and livelihood, it is no business of his to say your business has got to shut down. For a month, he shut down every business other than the ones that he was prohibited by law from being able to shut down. And that shouldn't be shut down: banks, grocery stores, gas stations, and pharmacies. Those could be open. Nothing else could during that 1 month time that was used to redistribute supplies in the state and build up reserves for a second potential wave of COVID that eventually did come. The result of that shutdown is that hospitals around the state were able to ensure that no one was denied care for COVID. Sometimes you couldn't get into your hospital, but they could transport you by ambulance 3 hours away to a different hospital, and you could at least be admitted. The resources were arranged. The National Guard called out ventilators, redistributed supplies, redistributed medicines, redistributed. It worked. His plan worked. You got to give it to him, whether you hate him or not over the election. His plan worked. And Georgia was the first state to reopen, and there was no viral surge until after the George Floyd protests and Memorial Day holiday revelers. And then after the Thanksgiving, there was the second surge. But his plan worked. Inarguably, his plan worked. And along the way, one of the things that it pained him to do was to shut down churches and other businesses because of capacities. And he was urging people, don't go to church. And if you do go to church, worship outside if you can. And if you can't, worship inside, but wear masks and please don't sing. My church met out on the street in front of the church. And when it rained, we didn't meet for a while, and then people started going into the worship hall or the sanctuary and the fellowship hall. There was a lot more room there. You could spread out. We have not set foot inside a church in a year. In my family, we've gone outdoor services, but not inside buildings, not with the virus. But there have been calls for the governor to ban church services. You know, a lot of blue state governors actually did. In California, the Supreme Court just struck it down. In California, medical marijuana dispensaries could be open, recreational marijuana dispensaries could be open, liquor stores could be open, but churches couldn't. And the recreational marijuana dispensary you could allow people in based on square footage and the number of people per square foot. But in churches with vast sanctuaries, in some cases, if 10 people went in, the church would get in trouble. It was always nuts. And a number of blue states have done this. They've particularly singled out churches as places not to gather. Georgia has not done that, and the way the governor has interpreted state law is that he cannot single out churches. It's got to be by class as a business, but there is a dispute. And some Democrats have complained about him being too generous to churches. Ed Stetzler from Cobb County has proposed a law, the Faith Protection Act. The governor has endorsed it. The law says that the governor is not allowed to single out churches for closure. And in fact, if he closes a class of business that would affect a church, the church does not have to close. This is Greg Bluestein in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Governor Brian Kemp wants to roll back the scope of the state's sweeping emergency powers to ensure they can't be used to specifically limit the practice of any religion. Kemp on Thursday endorsed a proposal, the Faith Protection Act, that would ban him and future governors from restricting whether religious institutions can congregate during a time of statewide emergency, such as a pandemic or other crisis. The Faith Protection Act will ensure the emergency powers of the governor of Georgia in the years to come are not used to limit the God-given right to worship, Kemp said. In Georgia, we've never shuttered churches, synagogues, or other places of worship because we value faith, freedom, and family. He added that when he signed the measure into law, Georgia would be a sanctuary state for people of faith. Shortly after state lawmakers granted him sweeping powers in March, Kemp publicly agonized over whether he should use his authority to shut down religious services, particularly since outbreaks in some of Georgia's worst hotspots were linked to religious gatherings. He opted instead to promote guidance from his office that strongly urged houses of worship to maintain social distance or risk further restriction. If they failed to comply, he said in a private call in April with more than 800 clergy members, the state could shut them down, but he never did. And more recently, he's talked of ways to ensure no future governor has to deal with some prickly issues about limiting religious worship. Now, part of this is, Democrats criticized him for not shutting down churches. And Stacey Abrams, of course, said she would shut down churches, that everything needed to shut down. So Ed Setzler, he's in Ackworth, Republican. He also is the author of the fetal heartbeat legislation last year. He has proposed the legislation, and it would bind future governors and Brian Kemp while he remains governor and prohibit him from ever shutting down a church during a time of emergency or pandemic. This doesn't mean churches themselves couldn't choose to shut themselves down, and it doesn't mean the governors couldn't urge them to shut down if they thought it was the right thing to do, but they couldn't send state patrol and shut them down. Up in Canada, a pastor in Canada has been thrown in prison for opening his church. Hang on a second. I actually want to let me give you the details on this because this is an interesting situation. It's always the Canadians. Canadian pastor jailed. It is, here we go. James Coates. A pastor in Alberta, Canada, who has repeatedly ignored pandemic-related health orders, said he'd rather serve jail time than disobey God. James Coates, pastor of Grace Life Church near Edmonton, turned himself into authorities after holding in-person worship services on Valentine's Day. According to the latest update from his lawyer, Coates is awaiting a bail hearing. His first obedience is to God, the government forcing Pastor Coates into a position where he has to choose between disobeying God and obeying government or obeying God and disobeying government. Alberta Health Services issued Grace Life Church a closure order in January because it exceeded the 15% capacity limit and wasn't enforcing mask wearing or social distancing guidelines. Alberta Health Services said the church was continuing to create unacceptable health risks. Grace Life, meanwhile, calls government lockdowns unnecessary and harmful. Coates and his congregation have rejected public health restrictions as an evil that has to stop. Now, here's the thing you need to know that seems to be left off. First of all, this guy is a graduate of Master's Seminary in California, or James MacArthur's run seminary with Grace Community. But also, notice, let me give you the wording here. The health order said it's because the church exceeded its 15% capacity limit. The problem here, though, is, according to people connected with the church, they really didn't have large crowds coming. The Canadians were essentially calculating the 15% capacity limit in a way that no normal person would. That you and I would look at the size of the church and say, well, the occupancy is this, 15% is that, go with that number. And instead, the church could house more than the congregation, and they were looking at the percentage of the congregation. which was a smaller number than if they used occupation of the building would result. Several people have pointed that out to me that doesn't seem to be understood, and that's where some of the problem comes in. So this guy is going to go to jail for maintaining his worship services when there were plenty of space in the church. It's not Australia, it is Canada, has been going after churches more than anyone else. That's also not really appreciated by a lot of people, that what Canada is doing is genuinely targeting churches and harassing churches and ensuring that churches follow rules they're not making everybody else follow. And they're coming up with creative excuses for that, like, oh, well, the church, they sing. Well, we now know singing actually isn't spreading the virus, believe it or not. Well, they're not wearing masks. Well, you're not making everybody else wear masks. Listen, churches understand that if everybody's got to follow a rule, they want to follow the rules as best they can as well. But what we're seeing in Canada, what we're seeing in California, what we're seeing in Nevada, what we saw in New York, is that a lot of churches are forced to adhere to rules no one else has to adhere to. And we've seen Stacey Abrams here say Brian Kemp should have shut down the churches. So now I think it's good, and I think if you see your local legislator this weekend, at church maybe, tell them they need to support Ed Setzler's legislation to keep churches open in Georgia, to not allow the government to shut them down. It'd be well worth it to do that. And, I got to say, kudos to Brian Kemp for saying he doesn't want the power and he wants to bind future governors to this as well. He does not want the power to shut down a church and doesn't think any governor should. He's right. They need to pass this law. Oh, look at that. It just screwed up everything on my... Wow. I'm sorry, folks. I just messed up my entire mixer board by clicking a switch on my computer.
Erick Erickson gives you the information you need.
You can call in 877-973-7425. Let's go over to Augusta, Georgia, and Scott is calling. Scott, welcome. Scott, you there? Well,
I'm sorry.
there you go.
Hey, Eric.
Yep.
Sorry, I had you on mute. Hey, I had.
Are you my wife? You put me on mute. You don't sound like my wife.
No, I had a quick question about the media's partisanship. It seems to me like, and I'm 60 years old, so I mean I've been, I've seen it change over the years. It seems to me that once these diversified, companies started buying media operations, newspapers, television, when they were standalone entities, they had to be responsive to their market, to their customer. And now it seems like they're just, politburos for the or providers for their corporate owners, for the multinationals.
Yeah, that's a great point, and to some degree, that's true. But there's also market-wise, their corporate owners tend to lean left, and the boards and the owners, the CEOs, the marketing staff, and then so many of these guys are in New York City. They cater towards the New York crowd, which leans left. I mean, the New York Times, for example. It is increasingly a subscriber-oriented entity, and those subscribers tend to be on the left. So the New York Times is rapidly becoming not a mouthpiece of news, but a mouthpiece of left-wing thought. It's a real problem. Local news still matters. So there's a newspaper north of me, the Monroe County Reporter, and the owner's a conservative. The community's a conservative. It covers the local news well, and it's a profitable entity. Because it's delivering the local news that matters to local people in their local community on a weekly basis with actual reporters telling them what's going on. And frankly, one of their focuses on corruption. In fact, there's a big story in it this week. The local announcer for the high school football team has been canned. He was a volunteer, but they won't let him do it anymore because he dared to criticize the school superintendent on his Facebook page for showing up at a bunch of progressive rallies. And so they fired the volunteer who has been the longtime football announcer, and so the local paper's covering it. You don't see it in it's not a national story, but it's clearly a big story in the local, and they're providing a service. These national networks now are increasingly afraid that if they tell liberals something liberals don't like, liberals won't watch them or subscribe to them, and they're deeply concerned about that sort of stuff. It's unfortunate. But yeah, it's going to be a growing problem with these national publications. And look at the response to Rush, by the way. The response to Rush Limbaugh dying from a lot of these publications are jubilant. Oh, that guy's finally gone. They did not like the fact that a guy like him could build an audience larger than their combined audience and then point out the facts that these entities were routinely leaving out of stories. And that's what he did. That's what made him successful. He provided the rest of the story, to quote Paul Harvey. Paul Harvey himself had did that for the longest time. He did it in a different style than Rush, a 15-minute newscast. My dad, when I was little, loved Paul Harvey. You want to get a spanking in my house? Make noise during Paul Harvey. The media doesn't like that others can compete. They don't like that bloggers exist. They don't like that Substack is a thing. I've got my daily email on Substack. They don't like this stuff. They don't like the breakup of the media monopoly. And increasingly, you see them towing party lines. I mean, product placement. How often are you going to see Good Morning America, owned by ABC News, which is owned by Disney? How often are you going to see them get Disney exclusives? You're probably not going to see the Disney exclusives on CBS. Which, by the way, when we come back, I want to talk about all these streaming services because they're becoming a thing. You're not going to see these things you're not going to see Disney stuff on CBS or NBC. On NBC, you're going to get Friends, I guess. When does the Peacock network take over? The whole streaming thing. And yes, they've got to advance a bottom line, and they rationalize it as we can't deliver the truth and the news without also being corporate shills. But increasingly, not only are they corporate shills, they're shills for the left. They're not really shills for truth. They don't want to. They don't really care about the truth anymore. You know, it's remarkable to me. For example, it is a joke popularized by Rush Limbaugh, but also a joke that we laugh about because we know it is true. The moment a Republican gets elected to office, within 48 hours, in fact, this happened with Donald Trump. Rush Limbaugh predicted it. The day after Donald Trump won the election in 2016, Rush Limbaugh said it was going to happen, and 24 hours later, he was proven right. The front page stories about the crisis and homelessness in America. Rush, I will never forget this. I was listening to him the day after Trump got elected. And within his first half hour was laughing about, well, homelessness is going to become a problem again. Sure enough, within 24 hours, I think it was the New York Times or the Washington Post, had a story on the rising homelessness problem in America. And yeah, I mean, it is predictable. It is like the driven snow. You know it's going to happen. The media, the moment a Republican gets elected, homelessness. We got a crisis of homelessness. Never mind that they were talking about a crisis of homelessness that existed when Barack Obama was still president. Suddenly it was Donald Trump's fault. He got elected. They're homeless people. The moment a Democrat gets elected, who cares about homeless anymore? Now we got to do racial reconciliation, and guns are bad again. Let's fight on guns. That the media's gotten that predictable that Rush Limbaugh could say the day after Trump was elected, get ready for all the stories on homelessness, and within 24 hours, there's a homelessness story. That they've gotten that predictable shows you that it's not really about the relevancy of stories anymore. It's about towing a party line. The party line is on the left. Ironically, it's the local newscast and where you get a lot of conservatives. I know way more Republicans and conservatives on local news networks around the country than I do at the national ones. And local reporters with local newspapers tend to be more conservative as well.
15.
You can find truth in the world today, but it's typically at your Monroe County Reporter, not at your USA Today or New York Times. Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you would like to be a part of the program, then we'll open up the phone lines today in honor of Rush. We'll have our own open line Friday. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Sama in Athens, I'm going to go to you next. Welcome.
Yes, sir. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Very good, sir. The topic I would like to talk about is Brian Kemp. Why a good person always being a victim just because he's a member of a certain party? Brian Kemp, everybody in Clark County loves him. Madison County, Oconee County. He's native for this area, and he did a lot to help the people. And now he's working hard to help every person, regardless if he is a Republican or Democrat or minorities. He's trying to do his best to improve the life and the quality of life of the people of Georgia. But when I ask people in Clark County, for example, guys, are you going to vote for Brian Kemp for the next term? Everybody say, well, he is Republican. So why a great person, or why people have this kind of discrimination, just however they know and they admit that this is the right person in the right position.
That they benefit by his leadership. Yeah. And so one of the things is just tribalism, political party tribalism, that they can recognize he's doing a good job, but they think, well, my party would do a better job. Stacey Abrams would do a better job. And of course, there are some Republicans right now who are mad at him over the election, even though he had no power to do anything. They still blame him for not doing anything.
Yes, sir.
And, this is one of the frustrations. Sama, thank you very much for the phone call. And this is, I've got this frustration across the board. And, occasionally, believe it or not, occasionally, now this is going to ruffle some feathers here when I say this. Prepare yourselves. Occasionally, very rarely, maybe by chance, a Democrat might actually do something good. Just maybe John Kennedy cut taxes. Maybe Bill Clinton balanced the budget with the Republicans. Occasionally a Democrat can do something good, sometimes, maybe. We should be willing to call him out and say thank you. We should be willing to say job well done. And that goes with Brian Kemp as well, who's done a remarkable job steering this state through rough waters. No one gets elected. I don't care whether we're talking Stacey Abrams, Brian Kemp, Zell Miller, Sonny Perdue, Nathan Deal, Jason Carter. It doesn't matter. No governor gets elected and foresees global pandemic. And there was overwhelming pressure for him to be draconian in what he did, and he refused to do it. And this state is way better off by him trusting his gut as a former small businessman saying, I'm not going to do this stuff and hurt small businesses. We're way better off because of that. And I think we need to acknowledge that. Now, I want to talk about a topic that fascinates me. Folks, I'm going to be very honest with you out of the gate here as I begin this topic, that this is a topic I am interested in and perhaps none of you are. But you know what? It is the Erick Erickson Show. It is not the random stranger hate listening in his car show. I got a phone number for you people. I am fascinated by the rise of streaming services. There's Alex Sherman writing for CNBC. There are no rules to judge winners and losers in the streaming wars. Let's try to fix that. Disney's Disney Plus, AT&T's HBO Max, Comcast, NBC Universal's Peacock, and the many other streaming services that have popped up in the last year or so will all be competing for eyeballs in 2021. A few will succeed on their own. Some will need to bundle for scale. Some, like Quibi, may shut down completely. Each streaming service is different. Peacock has a free, advertising-supported version. Discovery Plus wants to be a complement to other streaming services, according to CEO David Zaslav. Disney Plus has already predicted it will have amassed as many as 260 million global subscribers by 2024. That's much more aggressive than Peacock's forecast of 30 million to 35 million active users by 2024, or HBO Max's 50 million domestic subscribers by 2025. Given so many different products with different goals, it will be easy for most media companies to declare victory on their own terms. That won't be helpful to investors. Not every streaming service deserves to exist or win, Kevin Mayer, former head of Disney Plus and ex-CEO of TikTok, told CNBC. There will be winners and losers that evolve over the next several years. Some guidelines. The race to 50 million subscribers. Last month, NBC Universal said Peacock had 33 million signups. HBO Max had 37.7. Disney's Hulu had nearly 40 million. CBS Viacom, CBS All Access, soon to be relaunched as Paramount Plus, said it combined with Showtime's digital service to have 18 million at the end of last year. Whether or not they can get to 50 in 2021 or soon thereafter will be a good test of their longevity. Domestic success alone won't be enough for the Tier A services. Starz CEO Jeff Hirsch defines them. The products aim to be cable bundle replacements on phones and TVs around the world. There's Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime Video, and may also include HBO Max, Peacock, Paramount Plus, Hulu. Netflix already has 200 million global subscribers. Disney Plus is well on its way to 95 million subscribers. Amazon announced 150 million global subscribers. While Netflix, Disney Plus, and Prime Video are ad-supported services, HBO Max, Peacock, Paramount Plus, Hulu all have or plan to have lower-tiered products with commercials. Others, like Fox's Tubi and Viacom's Pluto, are free for consumers and rely on advertising. There is so much. So let's hang on a second. List of American streaming services. Let's review the list here. You've got all of these services that are out there, and they're essentially trying to replace cable television by becoming cable television. You can buy Disney, you can buy Netflix, you can buy HBO Max, you can buy Paramount Plus, which is CBS. Fox has a service. Fox has an all-access service. Who else? ABC and Disney. They're together. The whole thing is nuts. Here, okay, an updated list. Fubo, Philo, Hulu Plus, Sling TV, AT&T TV, YouTube TV, Spectrum TV Essentials, Pluto TV, Zumo Cloud TV, LG Channel Plus, TV Everywhere, Xfinity Instant, NBC News Now, Friendly TV, VidGo, T-Mobile T-Vision, ESPN Plus, NBA League, NFL Game Pass, NHL TV, Fox Soccer, UFC Fight Pass, WWE Network, Bleacher Report, NBC Sports Gold, MLB TV, Poker Go, Willow TV, F1 TV, Slice, Jinx, Twitter, Danes, Twitch, Netflix, Hulu, Redbox, Fandango Now, Tubi TV, Crackle, Popcorn Flicks, Apple iTunes, Apple TV Plus, Google Play, Shout Factory TV, Vudu, Vimeo, Pantaflix, Volta, Big Star Movies, Roku, IMDb TV, FlixFlick, Discovery Plus, Amazon Prime Video, YouTube, Outside TV, Facebook, Crunchyroll, Funimation Now, VRV, DC Universe Plus, Curiosity Stream, Guide Dog, Magnolia Selects, PureFlix, Dove Channel, Faith and Family, Drama Fever, Blaze TV, Laugh Out Loud, Kawada TV, Broadway TV, BritBox, Acorn TV, Filmstruck, Fender, Gala, Quello, Reverie. I hadn't heard of any of these. We're all going to go bankrupt $5 at a time with these people. You know, for all of the, let's get into this one now. You got Disney Plus, HBO Max, Disney Plus Stars, AMC Premiere, Lifetime Movie Club, Paramount Plus, Hallmark Movies Now, FX Plus, History Vault, Showtime, Stars, Epix, MaxGo, CW Seed, Peacock, and the like. We're going to go bankrupt $5 at a time. There used to be this thing. In fact, there's still this thing called cable television, where you can pay, $100? You can get all the sports, you can get all the entertainment, you can get it all together, you can line it all up. And then you've got a button where you can say, I want to record this show on demand and watch it later. But with a lot of cable television services, you can't watch them also on your phone and your tablet and your computer. You got to watch them on a TV. And now it's about watching everywhere. But what if you pay for 500 streaming services and just like cable television, there's not crap to watch? Live sports? I bought a hockey package to have something to watch with Philip when he comes over on Sunday so I don't actually have to talk to him. So we're going to watch hockey. I got a foosball table too. I don't know that he's listening with what I just said. We'll see if there's a reaction. But you get college football. Maybe you get baseball. Y'all, I'm sorry. I love baseball in a stadium with a beer. But watching baseball on TV, I might as well watch chess. He says I'll love the hockey. Yeah, I won't have to talk to him. We'll watch hockey. We'll watch fights. It'll be like the UFC and the WWF combined. I'm sorry, the WWE. But still, not to distract from the central point here. You could buy cable television and watch television, or you could buy a bunch of streaming services to replace television, and in your head you think, well, I'm only going to get the one that I want to watch. But you don't want to watch just one. I got Netflix. Do you know how hard it is to find something worthwhile to watch on Netflix these days? Both of my kids think I should just go on and cancel it. Except Chef's Table. I love Chef's Table and The Crown. We've got Disney Plus, and apparently I got to get into WandaVision. We've got HBO Max, which I hardly ever watch anymore. And then I bought a giant TV. I bought a 85-inch television. 4K no less. Sony Bravia. Got a Dolby Atmos surround sound system. And I'll go watch it on a Friday night. And my family, they're all staring at their tablets. Like, why do you want to watch a movie on your phone when you could watch it on 85-inch? Because you can watch it in your bed, in your room. But this goes full circle here. We're all going to go bankrupt. If you go down this road, you can buy I have a DirecTV package. I've got the full biggest DirecTV package, and I have that particularly for this radio show. We don't even use it in the house, but I have it for here so that if there's breaking news on a particular channel, I can fire up the audio and be able to play it for you guys for a few minutes so you can listen, C-SPAN and the like. I've got it so I can keep up with the news when I travel and stuff. It's really, in fact, I've expensed it through the office because we don't watch TV in our house. We haven't turned on the satellite DirecTV in I don't know how long. The only time I use it is when I'm in here on radio. And now it's the streaming services that I don't business expense. They're actually the home service, the streaming services. One kid watches Disney, one kid watches Netflix, one kid watches Lord knows what. My wife watches Instagram live streams and YouTube stuff. We all watch YouTube stuff. Maybe I should pay for the YouTube package so we don't have to watch all the stupid ads. The YouTube to watch without stupid ads is like $14. That's the Netflix subscription, and Netflix is going up to $16. None of this, bottom line, is sustainable. The only one that I don't pay for, ironically, is Apple TV Plus, because I buy Apple products, and so I get Apple TV Plus for free. And Apple TV Plus has some of the best television shows and gets no buzz because nobody seems to be watching it, except Ted Lasso. Everyone should watch Ted Lasso and Tehran. Tehran, by the way, if you buy an Apple product, you get Apple TV Plus. You should immediately go watch Tehran and Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso is the greatest television show of the last year. Terrible profanity, you are warned, but it is the greatest show of the last year. And I don't have to pay for Apple TV Plus because I buy Apple products, and so you get it for free. And it is increasingly, rapidly becoming the new HBO. HBO is now bought by AT&T, and HBO has now decided to be everything and the kitchen sink streaming service. None of it quality, all of it okay. Apple has decided to actually be very selective. In fact, it's hired the head of HBO who brought you The Sopranos and Game of Thrones. So Apple TV Plus now has essentially the guys who vetted the product for HBO when HBO was the thing everyone buzzed about. They're now at Apple TV Plus. HBO Max now has all of HBO stuff and then some, and all of their old great content, but a lot of new stuff that isn't quite as good. And so Apple is making a strategic play, much like its products. We're not going to be for everybody, but we're going to be the best. And I don't know that any of us can keep up with any of this stuff. This is everyone wanted the broken chain where you could pick and say, I want this channel and not all the other channels. And now that we're finding out what it looks like, I don't know that it's sustainable. I have a sneaking suspicion. I've got a sneaking suspicion that Apple's going to try to solve this problem. They've tried to a degree, and I don't know that I like what they've come up with so far. You can go to if you've got an Apple TV, which I do, it's a box that you get all the streaming services, all your iTunes content, and you can see all the stuff. There's a live now button. You can see all the sports that's live, all the TV shows that are live. You can see all that stuff. I don't know that they've quite cracked it yet, but it looks like there are several patents floating around. Maybe, just maybe, they're going to try to solve this problem. Somebody should solve this problem. I don't think it's sustainable to have the HBO app, the Netflix app, the Apple app, the Disney app, the Hulu app, all of these other apps, and you're paying $5 for this one, $15 for this one, $2 for this one, free for this one with ads, and on and on and on and on and on. I just don't think that's sustainable. And you and I don't want to go bankrupt. How many Americans at this point don't even realize that they're spending as much as they are in subscriptions every month? That's going to be the next big problem that American consumers face. Is we all get our credit card bill or our bank statement. We're like, where are all these $5 fees going? To the streaming services you forgot you had. It's going to be the next big consumer wake up, and I'm sure somewhere Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Elizabeth Warren are getting ready to socialize it all.
There's not my truth.
Hello, welcome back. The phone number, if you would like to be a part of this here program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. This is from Reason Magazine. Is there anything that politics can't ruin? The answer, it appears, is a resounding no, as partisan conflict creeps into all areas of American life. Our political affiliations, researchers say, obstruct friendships, influence our purchases, affect the positions we take on seemingly apolitical matters, and limit our job choices. As a result, many people are poorer, lonelier, and less healthy than they would otherwise be. Political polarization is having far-reaching impacts on American life, harming consumer welfare and creating challenges for people ranging from elected officials and policymakers to corporate executives and marketers, according to a new paper in the Journal of Public Policy and Marketing by researchers from Arizona State University, the University of Wyoming, and 4 other U.S. universities. The researchers find that people's chosen political identities become self-reinforcing through associations with groups with shared beliefs. Our associations can even create a group-specific shared reality that makes it harder to relate to those with opposing views. As society has become increasingly polarized, politicians' objectives diverge, and their animosity towards the opposition grows, thereby reducing opportunity for compromise, the researchers warn. Partisan incivility is a major reason for failed dialogue. Uncivil exchanges result in disagreement and greater polarization regardless of the evidence presented. People's partisan identities influence the range of people with whom they are willing to have relationships, the brands they purchase, and the jobs they take. In an era of public health concerns, people often choose positions on matters such as vaccines or mask wearing, not based on a rational assessment of the issues, but on a plug-and-play adoption of their tribe's stances. This sort of politicized decision-making can stand in the way of rational choices and healthy connections. I gotta tell you guys, there's merit to this, and don't be dismissive of the concern, please. How many of you have people who are your friends with whom you vehemently disagree on politics? You know, I am a conservative talk radio show host, a former guest host of Rush Limbaugh, a conservative writer, a conservative commentator on television, and I actually enjoy my friends who have different political views than me. And do you know why? Because I don't have to talk about politics with them. If you have friendships with people with whom you fundamentally disagree in politics, you can find other things to talk about. I got a buddy of mine, bourbon and fishing. We disagree on politics, but bourbon and fishing, he wants to take me fly fishing. I'm going to go. Got another friend of mine who we vehemently disagree on. I don't know that there is a political issue on planet Earth on which we do agree.
30.
But we both love to cook. And so we can trade recipes and talk about things other than politics. And I'm the better for it by forcing me to find common ground with people with whom I disagree. They make me a better person, a more well-rounded person. And you should give it a try. You don't have to talk about politics. But increasingly, if we're honest, it's a lot of people on the left, that's all they can talk about these days. Hello and welcome. It's Erick Erickson. How are you? We're in honor of Rush doing an open line Friday. You can call in about whatever you want to call in about, recipes included, although you're going to have to lie to get past my call screener for that one. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I'm actually sitting here during commercial break wondering, what am I going to cook this weekend? Is it going to be cold out? What's the weather going to be? Can I grill? Can I use my smoker? I got to clean up my big green egg. I got a buddy of mine that I said could have my big green egg. I need to get it cleaned up this weekend for him. I got to figure out what am I going to cook? And all my meat is frozen, so that sounds like a personal problem, doesn't it? I got to thaw it out. All right, let's move on to things you actually care about. I'm going to spend some time with the Washington Free Beacon, which does just brilliant work. I dare say one of the publications that I read on a daily basis, and I think I'm a fan of the people who write there. I like them. I think they do good work. They're one of the better sites around is the Washington Free Beacon. I mean, really, they just do great work. And they got two stories, and I am a professional. I will tie them together. Here's the first. Aaron Siberium at the Free Beacon. The Lancet last week, the Lancet is the medical journal. The Lancet last week released a sweeping and much vaunted report on public health and policy in the Trump era. Its first key finding is that Donald Trump politicized science, which posed a uniquely urgent threat to health. The report, Public Policy and Health in the Trump Era, offers a host of quote-unquote science-led proposals it claims would mitigate the threat, from the implementation of the Green New Deal and a complete ban on coal mining to higher taxes, cuts to defense spending, and Medicare for all. Donald Trump politicized science. We got to depoliticize it by politicizing it. Good gracious. The list goes on. Repeal the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits federal funding of abortion, would also improve public health, except for the dead kids. As would an explicitly anti-racist agenda to eliminate gaps between minorities and non-Latinx white people. Latinx, ding, 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 ding. Listen, if you hear someone use the word Latinx, stop listening to them. They're an idiot. Reparations for blacks, Native Americans, and Puerto Ricans would be part of the agenda, the authors say. Reparations is pro-science now is reparations. The report, which received funding from George Soros' Open Society Foundation, was trumpeted on outlets from The Guardian to Forbes and illustrates the way scientific institutions can be hijacked for partisan ends, even as the hijackers decry the politicization of science. It also raises the question of whether Trump's fusillades against experts or the experts themselves have done more harm to their scientific credibility. The report is evidence for the latter, which critics arguing that the influential medical journal has replaced rigorous research with politics. The Lancet's editorial agenda during the pandemic has been a bespoke gift, wrapped up in a lovely bow, to every crank who wants to dismiss expert advice as no more than a thin veneer for the pet cultural obsessions of terminally online progressives, said Ari Schulman, the editor-in-chief of the New Atlantis, a journal of politics and science. A mad scientist working in a lab to give those cranks cultural power could hardly do better than this Lancet report. It's an impressive feat. It's also the latest example of scientific institutions taking overtly ideological stands, a trend that accelerated over the summer. Several medical journals, including The Lancet, responded to the death of George Floyd by declaring racism a public health emergency, as did the American Medical Association. In June, an open letter signed by more than 1,200 epidemiologists said Black Lives Matter protests were vital to the national public health. Way more vital than the businesses burned to the ground, no doubt. Whereas protests against stay-at-home orders, quote, not only oppose public health interventions, but are also rooted in, you guessed it, white nationalism. You want to open your business? You're a white nationalist. You want to go back to work? You're a white nationalist. You want a job? You're a white nationalist. Wait, you want a job and you're black? Well, you're a white nationalist too. It's funny how this stuff works. The Lancet report, which was drafted by over 30 public health experts, is a case study of the politicization of science. Although it claims that healing democracy will repair health deficits, the report's central premise is actually undemocratic. If public health reduces to progressivism, anyone against progressivism must be against public health. Abortion, reparations, affirmative action aren't up for debate. The report implies to oppose them is to oppose science itself. Now, I want to jump from this to a different one by Alex Nestor, also at Free Beacon. A radical new push to purge math curricula of allegedly racist practices like showing your work and finding the correct answer is bankrolled by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Gates Foundation is the only donor mentioned on the homepage of A Pathway to Equitable Math Instruction, a group of 25 education organizations whose curriculum states that asking students to show their work and find the right answer is an inherently racist practice. My kid bought a whiteboard the other day to be able to work out math problems on the whiteboard and then write the stuff down from the whiteboard, transpose it from the whiteboard, because at my kid's school, they've actually got to show their work. I had no idea it was racist to show your math work. I thought that's what you did, going all the way back to Pythagoras. Himself undoubtedly a Klansman. He wore a white toga. It must have been. Wonder what he was doing. He could say he was doing the geometry of crosses. Perpendicular lines, my foot. There was a torch in that room. Poor old Pythagoras, apparently a racist. He showed his work. Over the past decade, the Gates Foundation has given upwards of $140 million to some of the groups behind Pathways to Equitable Math Instruction, whose anti-racist resources are the basis of a new teacher training course offered by the Oregon Department of Education. The Education Trust, a California-based group that promotes the September release of Pathways Anti-Racist Toolkit, has received $86 million from the Gates Foundation, including a $3.6 million grant awarded in June. Teach Plus, another group dedicated to creating an anti-racist culture in K through 12 schools, has received more than $27 million from the Gates Foundation. The group's board members include former Democratic Congressman George Miller and Obama era Secretary of Education John King Jr., who was president of the Education Trust. West Ed, a nonprofit committed to dismantling systemic barriers in schools, has received more than $35 million from the Gates Foundation. Unbound Ed, an organization, get it, Unbounded, Unbound Ed, an organization dedicated to helping teachers disrupt systemic racism in the classroom, has received $14 million. And on and on and on and on it goes. And they've got 5 guidebooks now designed to help middle school math teachers reveal racism in math. If you think 2 + 2 is 4, you might as well be burning a cross instead of writing a plus sign. How dare you think 5 + 2 is 7? What if the 2 identifies as a 3 and it really wants to be 8? Even though it looks on paper like 5 + 2, it's really 5 + 3. You bigot! This is insanity. The inmates are running the asylum. Let me tell you what's going on here. we live in a society where the big stuff doesn't really matter anymore. These people really don't perceive real threats. So they've got to concoct imaginary threats. They don't view geopolitical turmoil with Iran, Russia, China as threatening to them. They view their fellow Americans as threatening to them. But there's something more here. You've got to understand this. You've got to understand. This is religious fervor. As people no longer go to church and recognize we're all sinners and we can build no utopia, they take the trappings of religion and they apply it to politics. And since they don't believe in a heaven anymore, per se, the echo of heaven is there, but it's now heaven on earth. They've got to build a utopia. And to build a utopia, everything they don't like has to be stamped out. And racism, if you believe that racism is systemic in everything and still exists, well, then it's got to be in math because, I mean, if it's systemic, it's in everything. It's in all the systems. And math is a system. And to purge the heretics, you must purge the racism from math. And so they could look at a 2, a plus sign and a 2, an equal sign and a 4, and say, there's got to be racism in that. This is what you get in post-truth society, in postmodern society. You can have your truth, and I can have my truth, and who the hell cares about the real truth? Math is an objective. Math would be math on planet crap 2 of Alpha Centauri. They may not call the 1, but they know the single digit, the singular. And they know that if they have one single and they put them together, suddenly they have 2. Now, it may be wahad, and you get ithnain in Arabic. 1 is wahad, itnain, the money Araba kamsa sita sabat, the money tisra ashra. Doesn't sound like English to you, does it? It's not. Wahad, itnain, talata, Araba kamsa sita sabat, the money tisra ashra. I grew up in Dubai, had to remember these things. So it may not be 1 plus 2 equals 3. It may be wahad plus ithnain gets you tabia, wahad ithnain talata, or ithnain plus ithnain gets you araba. But it's still, when you write it out on paper, it's 2 plus 2 equals 4. When you go to planet Crapto and Alpha Centauri, it's going to be the same thing. But they've decided it's racist because they're not really looking at math anymore. They're looking at religion. Politics has become religion. And in their politics, in their fervor, what is sin? Sin is anything they don't like. One of the things they don't like is racism. Racism, objectively bad. Everyone agrees racism is bad. They've decided that just as sin is systemic, see, what's really systemic in society is sin. All of society is covered in sin. They've decided instead that all of society is covered in that which they don't like, which is racism, which is in everything. And so if sin is in numbers, well, racism's got to be in numbers. And it's got to be stamped out. And the way you stamp it out to build your heaven on earth is to force people to talk about it and change the way things are done. So if there's racism in mathematics, it is in revealing your work because you have to work through the math problems. You should be allowed to just put the numbers down because if you use a calculator, who's to stop you using a calculator? You learning to do the math is actually a white man's burden upon you. Where this actually winds up is that you have yet another generation of American children left behind by the rest of the world. But that's actually the point, isn't it? You see, the left views the United States as bad. The left views themselves, the progressive left. I'm not talking about liberals in general. There are a lot of liberals in this country who actually do love this country, and you and I can disagree with them on public policy. They think it's better for people that elevate mental poverty and the like, but you get a lot of progressive left in this country. They see the United States as capitalist system, the free market, you and me, our free speech, all of it is bad. And the way to get rid of it is slowly over time to get rid of education and begin to indoctrinate. And to make people feel like they're victims. And who is the victimizer here? It's the system itself. The system set up by the founders. That's why the New York Times had to revise the entirety of American history into the 1619 Project, so to rewrite history as bringing sin instead of now listen here, listen, pay attention to this. In Romans, Paul writes that all of nature is reflected of God's glory. When you read mythologies, you have a lot of people on the left who don't believe in Christianity because they say, well, it's just like the mythologies of the Greeks or the Romans or the Egyptians or this mythology or that mythology. Well, part of what Paul is saying, though, is that real religion echoes in the false religion. Because God, if we're all made in God's image, we all have a soul, we're indwelled with an echo of divinity, and those who don't have that relationship with God, they try to form it through something else. And so what the left is doing here is they have a concept of sin, but they don't articulate it as a concept of sin. And like the devil, the serpent coming into the garden and causing the fall of man and sin polluting down to the soil, they believe that the systemic sin is racism, and so they've revised the mythology. And so you have an echo of Genesis in the 1619 Project. The white devils came to North America, a Garden of Eden, and brought with it slavery, and it polluted the soil itself. And systemic racism is systemic sin. And everything that's come is sin-built, sin-based, racism-built, racism-based. And to repent, to heal, there's not a Jesus Christ coming to die on a cross and save us and get us through a fallen world. No, because Jesus Christ doesn't exist. And we ourselves are Jesus Christ, and we ourselves must die to racism and rise again, reborn in a new utopia. That's how they process this stuff. They won't articulate it that way. They will dispute it, but that's ultimately what is going on. They're co-opting real religion for their mythology. The mythology echoes the truth. And the echo of the truth is systemic racism instead of systemic sin. And the way you get rid of it is, well, you got to purge it from everything, including from objective truths like 1 + 1 = 2.
Want to be on the show? Call Erick now at 87.
Hi there. How are y'all? The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC. 877-973-7425. Hang on a second. I gotta find this. Because I want us all to universally laugh at nope. Apparently, well, now I can't find it, and I had it up earlier. That's disappointing. Yep, nope, here we go. You know the crying laughy emoji? You know the crying laugh. It's almost the weekend, folks. I promise I hadn't started drinking. The crying, laughing emoji. I use it frequently. Not as frequently as the one I tend to send to Charlie and Philip the most, which will go unremarked upon here. This is an actual CNN story. This is not listed as opinion. Nope. Bad news for people who frequently use the cry and laughing emoji. It's no longer cool. In recent weeks, two internet-savvy generations have been clashing in videos and comments on TikTok over the hallmarks of millennial culture that are now deemed uncool by Gen Z. The list includes skinny jeans, side parts, and perhaps most painfully of all, the popular laughing, crying emoji that some millennials use hundreds of times a day. What's wrong with the emoji? One user asked in a TikTok comment. Another responded, it's so off. On a different video of a woman saying she's cut back on using it after learning kids don't, one teen commented, as a 15-year-old, I say you should use that like emoji because we're sure not going to.
10.
This is an actual news story on a news website. God help us. You know, I see a tweet by Wesley Yang that is worth commenting upon, or at least reading to you. There are actually two great tweets. One is Ted Cruz's vacation, an inadequate substitute for Trump outrage of the day. Just no juice to anything anymore. Yes. And then the other is a week from now, Ted Cruz should film himself walking out of his basement and tell everyone he hasn't left the basement in the last 2 weeks, just like Chris Cuomo did. Yeah. Okay. There are some things that we need to discuss. Let's begin with Representative Katie Porter on CNN.
Well, I think there's two issues. One is, how do we get them back? I think the good thing that President Biden has done is he's pushing. He's asking the right questions, he's setting deadlines, and he's mobilizing agencies like the CDC to issue guidance that then Senator Kamala Harris and I called for back in the summertime. The other part of this, though, that I think we're not planning enough is about what's going to happen when they do all go back to school. And that's where Senator Michael Bennet from Colorado and I have authored a letter to the Department of Education pointing out to them that we can't just put kids back in school as if their learning and social and emotional development has not been severely interrupted. And this problem is particularly acute with regard to math and science education. So it's a workforce issue and a workforce development issue as well.
Can't just put kids back in school. Nope. And it's going to be hard to do it. And now here comes Nancy Pelosi.
Now, the important point to make on this is where there is a high incidence of COVID, most of those schools are virtual or hybrid anyway. They're not actual. And the vaccination might not make it actual anyway. So again, there has to be a judgment made from the community as to how they go forward.
Even with the vaccines, they might not be able to open schools. I don't know. We can't actually play this video. We cannot actually play you the other one that I want to play for you. It is a school board school board member attacking parents for having the audacity to say that schools should reopen. Refers to the woman by an expletive. A Northern California school board discussed ways to limit the public's ability to speak at meetings and mocked parents who desperately want schools to be open. They want their babysitters back. Lisa Brezendine, a trustee of Oakley Union Elementary School District, told her colleagues during a pre-meeting session that they believed was not open to the public. School board member Kim Beatty mentioned a negative interaction with a frustrated parent, then described her own mindset. B word, if you're going to call me out, I'm going to F you up. Another member of the board theorized that parents want their kids to go back to school so they can spend their day getting high. The board also discussed whether it would be possible to change the public comment portion of their meeting so that members of the public would be cut off automatically after 3 minutes of speaking. Roughly 8 minutes of footage was recorded before the board members realized they were not alone. The board did not respond to a local reporter's request for comment. School Superintendent Gregory Hetrick released a public apology. I know our students deserve better from us, Hetrick said. I pledge to work collaboratively with stakeholders and community members to begin doing the important work that is needed to rebuild community trust in our district. He did not make offensive comments, Hetrick did not, but school board members did. Parents have started a petition calling on them to resign. Teachers are, in fact, babysitters. They obviously do more than that, but daycare is a fairly critical element of the job. Let's just be honest, parents need to go to work, and they can't. But I want to pause and I want to focus on something in this story. Charlie and I, we've had this conversation in the last 24 hours about matters related to us and people we work with. I want to read you again. This is the Superintendent Gregory Hetrick. He is with this Northern California School Board. He's the superintendent of the school system in Northern California. And please allow me to read for you this quote. I know that our students deserve better from us. I pledge to work collaboratively with stakeholders and community members to begin doing the important work that is needed to rebuild community trust in our district. I pledge to work collaboratively with stakeholders, community members, to do important work needed. Rebuild community trust. 8 corporate phrases. The only thing he didn't do was say they needed a holistic, systemic approach. The amount of corporate psychobabble speak in this, it's like he had a PR team working with it. You know, one of the problems in the early 21st century that we as a society are dealing with are institutions that are more interested in corporate speak than they are corporate do. They got a lot of doo-doo from their corporate speak and no actual do. I mean, I was suggested to me the other day that to make sure I use certain words in a presentation I'm doing. A buddy of mine a couple of weeks ago vented to me that his company, he works for a Fortune 500 company that will go nameless so he doesn't get in trouble. He works for a Fortune 500 company that is essentially encouraging employees to use and not use certain words. And it's all corporate speak. That everything's got to be put into corporate phraseology. And the navigators that can navigate through using the right words. This reminds me of a story. A friend and mentor of mine, her name was Dr. Billy Winsey. She was a school administrator. She worked at a special needs school for a long time, and then a school for troubled youth, and eventually became the headmaster of my former local high school. My high school was in a building and had elementary, middle, and high school together, and the local school system decided they wanted one person in charge of the whole thing, and then principals underneath. And the strong-willed superintendent really wasn't let go of control to someone who actually had better degrees than herself. Dr. Winsey had lots of degrees, was highly educated, knew what she was doing, and the school superintendent constantly interfered. Having hired Dr. Winsey, the superintendent wanted to interfere and nitpick and micromanage and undermine. But I'll never forget, I worked one summer in this school. She paid me, and I kind of was her run around the school, figure stuff out, get stuff done, figure out how to put stuff together, design stuff, put the computers together, all that sort of stuff during the summer. I adored this woman. She was brilliant. And she gave me some keen insight on one of the people who worked for her. There was one of the particular principals. And this particular principal, everything was polished, everything was clean, everything looked immaculate. And this principal would come to a meeting and would use the corporate buzzwords before those buzzwords needed to be used. I mean, he was in 3-piece suits and the perfect Windsor knot, and he would sit down and his school, well, in our division, we're going to systemically and holistically approach the pathways to education in a 3-fold pattern of mind development for the children, and not judge them by their age, but by their unique abilities, recognizing that the stakeholders who are participants in our education program come from diverse backgrounds, and we need to meet them where they are within our building to connect with their life so that we can educate the next generation in a mindful approach that is holistic and delivers in all of the areas of need. I mean, he would talk about it. You're like, what the hell are you talking about? That doesn't make sense. It's corporate word babble. It's like you've shaken up a box of dictionary words and thrown them out. Or you know what it's like, the modern day equivalent? Have you played the game with your friends where you send a text message with your iPhone autocorrect where it suggests words and you just build sentences off the words? Let me do this. Charlie, I'm going to send you this text message. We're going to do this together. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about, I hope. So let's see. Well, I'm going to start. Well, I think I could have a better idea about the other things I need to get a hold on the next day you would like. Makes no sense, but let's go with it. I mean, that's essentially what's happening here with the corporate speak. So this guy who would do this, I mean, he would use words like, he's the very first person I ever knew who used the word holistic systemic approach. That was a phrase he would use, holistic systemic approach. I, to this day, have no idea what a holistic systemic approach would be, but everything was perfectly refined. Yes, word salad. That's exactly what it is, word salad. He would use corporate speak word salads. And everything, I mean, his suits were pristine, his office was pristine, everything was pristine, the floors were immaculate, everything. And I'll never forget one time, I was so impressed by that. I mean, everything was put together, words were carefully delivered, phrases I had no idea what the hell they meant, and he would deliver them. And I'll never forget, I commented one time, and Dr. Winsey said, close the door. So I closed the door. She said, those are the people you got to watch out for. I said, what do you mean? She says, they're more attuned to the way things look and sound than the way things actually work. It's like, huh? She's like, everything that is outwardly appearing is immaculate. And every word choice chosen, you can interpret for yourself, so you can't stick it to him. And when you scratch the surface, there's mess everywhere. I'll never forget this. She says, his school looks clean, and his office looks put together, and his word choices sound so polished. And his kids in his division are falling behind. And his teachers are upset. And his teachers can't teach because he's so focused on them looking a certain way that it's bound them in ways they can't actually do what they need to do to teach. And I thought, you know, this reminds me, and she would not be a Rush fan, but it reminded me, thinking back on this, one of the things about Rush Limbaugh is he perceived people better than they perceived himself. Like, there were times where he would criticize people to me in a private conversation. He would criticize other people, but it was never a mean-spirited criticism. It was always critiquing what they were doing that they should not do. And he got it, and he understood it. And she, with this particular principle, pointed out that people who speak like this are skin-deep personalities, and if they're that skin-deep in their job, then you can't expect anyone else to be more than superficially good at what they're doing. When you have a school superintendent who says, I pledge to work collaboratively with stakeholders and community members to begin doing the important work that is needed to rebuild community trust in our district, you know he's more interested in sounding good in ways that none of us can bind him than he actually is giving tangible metrics of performance by which he's going to improve what he's doing. And we see this, it is right through corporate America now. You use the right buzzwords, you're going to get ahead. Who cares whether you deliver, as long as you sound like you're a team player, as long as you sound like you know what you're doing, it doesn't matter what you actually do. And that is something in our society right now through any corporation. Down here in Macon, Georgia, where I am, I guarantee you there are businesses just like that. You say the right things, you use big fancy words, 50-cent words when you only need a penny word, and by God, you're going to succeed in life in the business, even as the business fails. We need more people willing to speak frankly without using the corporate buzzwords who actually get the job done. We don't actually need word salads. We need actual, real sustenance in corporations, in our schools, in our lives, in our politicians. And too many people are wanting to speak in corporate psychobabble so that none of us can ever bind them to what they say. No one wants to be a leader. Everyone wants to be the leader, actually, and no one wants to lead. Everyone wants to cast blame and deflect and use fancy words so that we can't actually know what they're actually talking about. And then well, you just misunderstood me. I meant I wanted a holistic systemic approach, not a systemic holistic approach.
He doesn't just have a radio show. Erick has a website.
I've mentioned this story before. It ties in perfectly to the corporate newspeak that so many people use the corporate psychobabble, newspeak language, word salads, and you don't actually have to be held accountable for stuff. I've told the story before when I was a kid and I was really interested in the stock market and investing. And one of the first companies I ever bought stock in when I was old enough to be able to do it myself was Archer Daniels Midland, ADM, supermarket to the world. Because I watched the Sunday Show. I watched David Brinkley. Man, did I watch David Brinkley. Because I love George Will. George Will was on and David Brinkley was on, and I would watch that show this week with David Brinkley. Watched it. I didn't watch Meet the Press with Tim Russert and the guy before Russert. And those commercials, they were impressive. ADM, it's got it together. Well, turns out the company sucked, but it was an ad campaign to get corporate dollars for ethanol and the like. And I grew up and I learned, if you got a company that's advertising the snot out of stuff on the Sunday shows, you probably need to steer clear of that company. And you know one of the companies in recent years that's been doing that? IBM. For a while it was GE, and now it's IBM and Watson Technology. You hear about Watson all the time. What the heck is Watson? You would think Watson was some computer that IBM goes into and says, Oh, great, Watson, tell us what to invent next. And Watson spits out a chart, and there you go. Well, Watson's just IBM's fancy computer algorithm and the like, and they tried to put it into healthcare and come up with cures for cancer. And it was a big branding campaign. They'd poured all this research into Watson, their artificial intelligence framework or what have you. And Watson, it turns out, is nothing more than a more complicated version of Siri, which itself isn't that good, or Amazon Alexa. It's a little more thinking, and its algorithm. Oh, the IBM people will hate me for saying it, but it hasn't lived up to what they want. But they branded everything as, we have Watson. They don't have Watson. We've got Watson. Watson, what are you going to do today? Watson, how do you make the cake? Watson, give me a new recipe for brisket. Watson, cure cancer. Watson may be able to give you the recipe for brisket, but Watson ain't curing cancer. And it is $1 billion in annual revenue, Watson Health, the initiative to use IBM's AI supercomputing framework to cure cancer. $1 billion in revenue, and it wasn't profitable. One of their high-profile initiatives, and now they're thinking of selling it and focusing on the cloud. IBM is one of those interesting companies. It really doesn't know what the heck it's doing anymore, does it? There are a lot of companies, they've been around for 100 years, and they just don't know what they are anymore. It's like Hewlett-Packard is now more of a defense contractor than it used to be a computer company. I remember when Michael Dell said AT&T Apple should sell itself, close up shop, and give the money back to shareholders. And now Dell may want to do the same thing. I think Dell's value, Apple makes Dell's book value in a day or two, something like that. It's ridiculous. The world changes, and all this innovation, so much of corporate innovation right now is corporate buzz and corporate speak and corporate nonsense. It reminds me, though, did you hear about the Robin Hood inquiry in Congress yesterday? Man, these people listen to this.
How is it that we are able to provide better execution quality than exchanges? Because exchanges are limited in their ability to do business by regulatory mandate. Exchanges by law have a minimum 1 cent wide market, which for low price securities means that they are less competitive than they otherwise could be. We're able to
How are you here and what are you doing?
Excuse me?
That wasn't either one of us. Continue, Mr. Griffin.
All right. So we're able to share our trading
That is one of the richest men on planet Earth gets interrupted by some member of Congress who didn't know how to do the Zoom call and starts yelling over the microphone. And then when he's talking, he's giving corporate word speak to placate members of Congress. No one wants to just actually be direct and honest anymore. I'll end on this note. One of the geniuses of Rush Limbaugh was to be able to take a complicated topic, and instead of bringing in an expert to explain it to you, he himself would talk to the expert, grasp the concept, and explain it in everyday language to everyone who could then hold him accountable if he was wrong.
30.
But he never was. We have too many people who have gone into corporate word salad nonsense and don't actually want to engage the real world in ways the real world understands, which is why so much trust is falling away and why so many conspiracy theories are rising, because nobody knows who to believe anymore, and the people that should be believed, they don't have the trust in order to believe them anymore, and that's a